Okay, so what if everything you think you know about reality, well, what if it isn't quite what it seems? Like, what if the universe wasn't actually designed by anything, but just sort of arose naturally? Today, we're really getting into some mind-bending concepts, things that will make you question, well, pretty much everything. We're exploring the grand design. It's a fascinating book by two really brilliant minds, Stephen Hawking and Leonard Mlodinow. And this book, it doesn't shy away from the biggest questions, existence, the universe, our place in it all. It tackles them using the latest science, not just old philosophy.
Absolutely. And what we want to do today is really pull out the most important insights from this book, help you get a handle on these sometimes pretty complex scientific ideas and what they actually mean for how we see the universe. It's about getting to the heart of these huge questions without, getting totally bogged down in the heavy science.
Right. And as we explore this stuff, you should also check out Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel. We use AI for book analysis there. And it's all about encouraging reflection, rational thought. Really good companion for the kind of ideas we're discussing today. Okay, so let's dive in. Humans have always grappled with these huge questions, haven't they? I mean, how do we even start to understand the world? How does the universe actually work? What even is reality? Where did it all come from? And the really big one, does it need a creator?
Yeah, those questions are ancient, as old as thinking itself, probably. Yeah. For ages, the answers were, well, myths. Divine intervention. Think about the Vikings, for example. They had this story that eclipses happened because these giant wolves, Skull and Hati, were chasing the sun and moon. Sometimes they caught them. It's a great story,
But just a story.
Yeah.
Still, even back then, some people were watching closely, like the ancient Babylonians. They didn't know why eclipses happened, apparently, but they noticed the patterns. They could actually predict lunar eclipses pretty accurately. That feels like a really key step, doesn't it? Moving away from pure myth towards observation.
Definitely. It shows you can find patterns even without the why. Another really vivid example, the book mentions the Klamath Indian legend about Mount Mazama. That's the volcano that erupted, around 5600 BC and formed Crater Lake. Their legend talks about a battle between gods Lao and Skell, and Lao falls into the mountain, making the crater. It's a classic example of attributing natural disasters to gods or maybe human actions messing things up. It's how people made sense of chaos, I guess. Finding someone or something to blame.
And then things started to shift. Around 2,600 years ago, something really important happened. Thinkers like Thales of Miletus, over in Ionia, that's modern Turkey, right? They started saying, hold on, maybe natural events aren't just gods being angry. Maybe they follow rules. Consistent rules you could figure out. They thought you could understand the world without needing myths or theology. That was pretty radical back then.
Oh, absolutely radical. It basically laid the foundation for science. And you see these early laws appearing, like Pythagoras figuring out the math behind musical harmonies and vibrating strings, and Archimedes giving us laws for levers, buoyancy, how light reflects. These weren't just descriptions, they were predictive. Then Democritus, another Ionian, came up with atomism, this idea that everything's made of tiny, uncollidable particles. That eventually led to ideas like inertia.
And Aristarchus. He used careful observations to deduce that the sun was way bigger than Earth, which led him to this revolutionary idea, heliocentrism. Earth goes around the sun, not the other way. He even thought the stars were just really distant suns. Amazing foresight.
Incredible. But, these Ionian ideas didn't always win out immediately. They often clashed with the dominant philosophies. Aristotle, for example. He wasn't keen on atoms. He was more focused on the why of nature, not the how. And his ideas held sway for, almost 2,000 years. Later on, Christian thinkers sometimes saw the universe as, God's dollhouse.
Yeah.
Natural laws were okay, but they couldn't limit God's power to do whatever he wanted. There was even this Bishop Tempier in 1277 who condemned the idea that nature had to follow laws because that restricted God. The book makes this darkly funny point that Pope John XVII, who'd asked Tempier to investigate this, was killed a few months later when his palace roof collapsed.
Oh, wow.
A pretty stark reminder of the law of gravity.
Yikes. Yeah, that really drives home the point about the shift in thinking. And it leads us right into the 17th century. That's when the modern idea of laws of nature really took off. Galileo was key, insisting on observation. But it was René Descartes who really formalized it. He thought the physical world ran on collisions, basically, and that the laws governing it were absolute unchanging reflections of God's own nature, everywhere, always. He also got the importance of initial conditions, know the start, and the laws tell you the future.
Right.
Then Newton came along and, well, his laws of motion and gravity just blew everything open. We still use them constantly, building bridges, sending probes to Mars.
So what exactly is a scientific law in this modern sense? It's not just something we happen to see. It's a regularity that lets us make testable predictions. Saying the sun always rises in the east is a law because we can test it tomorrow. But saying all the computers in this room are black, that's just a fact about this room right now, not a law. Better example from the book. All spheres of uranium-235 are less than a mile across. That sounds like just an observation, but it is a law.
Why?
Because nuclear physics tells us that if you did make a sphere of U-235 bigger than about 6 inches, it would instantly go critical. Boom. Uncontrolled chain reaction.
Ah, okay, so it's an inherent limit.
Exactly. It's built into the physics. It shows that laws aren't isolated facts. They're part of a bigger system, and they have to hold at least under specific conditions.
Okay, so we have these universal laws.
Yeah.
But, as the book points out, that immediately raises some really deep questions, like where did the laws themselves come from? Are there ever exceptions?
Yeah.
Miracles? And is this the only possible set of laws the universe could have?
Big questions. And this takes us straight into determinism. Laplace, back in the 18th century, made this famous argument, scientific determinism. He basically said, if you could know the exact state of everything in the universe at one specific moment, then a complete set of laws would tell you precisely what happened in the past and exactly what will happen in the future. No room for miracles, no room for God intervening. When Napoleon asked him about God's role in his model, Laplace supposedly said, "Sire, I have not needed that hypothesis."
Bold.
Very. It implies a clockwork universe running entirely on its own steam.
But wait, if everything is determined by physical laws,
What about us?
what about free will? There are those neuroscience experiments, right?
Yeah.
Where stimulating a bit of the brain makes someone want to move their hand. It really makes you wonder if our feeling of choosing freely is just an illusion playing out within determined physics.
It's a massive philosophical tangle, honestly. But predicting human behavior is just incredibly complex, too many variables. So in practice, we use what the book calls affective theories, things like psychology or economics. They work by basically assuming people have free will, even if, deep down, the physics might be deterministic. It's a useful simplification for everyday life, even if people don't always act rationally.
Okay, this feels like a good point to bring in model-dependent realism. This is a huge idea in the book. The suggestion is that there's no single objective reality out there that we just passively observe. Is that right?
That's the core of it. Reality, in this view, is something our minds construct using models. It's about what's useful for explaining and predicting, not about some ultimate untouchable truths.
It really flips your intuition upside down.
It does. The book uses this brilliant analogy. Imagine a goldfish living its whole life in a curved bowl. To the goldfish, the straight lines outside the bowl look curved. Everything is distorted.
Right.
But crucially, that goldfish could still figure out scientific laws based on its observations. Its laws would predict how things move in its curved world. They'd be more complicated than our laws for the outside world. But from the goldfish's perspective, they work perfectly fine.
That goldfish example really helps. So what's the big takeaway for us not living in a fishbowl? Or are we?
Well, the point is, if you have two different models, like the old Ptolemaic system with Earth at the center versus the Copernican system with the sun at the center, and both accurately predict, say, where Mars will be, you can't really say one is more real. The Copernican one is just simpler and more convenient for calculations. We prefer it for its utility. It's like in the Matrix. If we were in a simulation with consistent rules, how would we ever know unless we could step outside it? Our reality would just be the model that works within the simulation.
Wow. So our brains are literally building our reality all the time.
Pretty much. Our brain takes all this sensory data light hitting our retinas, sound waves, and constructs a coherent mental model. Think about those experiments with glasses that flip everything upside down. At first, it's chaos. But after a while, your brain adapts. It flips the model, and the world looks normal again. What you perceive isn't raw data. It's the brain's interpretation, its current working model. It fills in the gaps, creates depth from 2D images.
And that explains how we can accept things we literally can't see, like electrons or quarks. We don't see an electron. But the model that includes electrons explains so many observations, like how cathode ray tubes worked or electricity.
Exactly. J.J. Thomson didn't see an electron in 1897. He inferred it because the model fit the experimental results. Same with quarks. You can't isolate a single quark, but the quark model makes beautiful sense of the zoo of subatomic particles. We accept the model because it works. It explains things elegantly.
So this model-dependent view applies even to the origin of the universe. How does that work?
Well, you have different models. Religious accounts often have creation happening at a specific time. St. Augustine famously argued time itself was part of creation, so asking what happened before time didn't make sense in his model. Then you have the Big Bang theory. It describes the universe starting about 13.7 billion years ago from an incredibly hot, dense state. According to model-dependent realism, you can't say one is inherently more real, but the Big Bang model is vastly more useful. It explains cosmic background radiation, the expansion of the universe, the abundance of light elements, tons of observations. A good scientific model, the book argues, should be elegant, have few arbitrary parts, match all observations, and this is key, make testable predictions that could potentially prove it wrong.
Okay, if you thought that was stretching your brain, let's talk quantum physics, because this is where things get really, really weird compared to our everyday experience. Classical physics just breaks down.
It really does. And there's this amazing experiment from 1999 in Austria that shows just how strange it is. Physicists fired these molecules shaped like tiny soccer balls, they call them buckyballs, one by one, through a screen with two tiny slits in it towards a detector screen.
Okay, so like little bullets go through one slit or the other. You'd expect two bands on the detector screen where they land.
That's what classical intuition says. But it's absolutely not what they saw. They saw an interference pattern, stripes of many buckyballs hitting, then stripes of few or no buckyballs hitting, just like waves interfering.
Wait, even though they fired them one at a time?
Exactly. And here's the kicker. In some spots on the detector, opening the second slit actually stopped buckyballs from arriving there. Think about that. You open another path, and fewer things get through to certain points.
That makes no sense for soccer balls.
None at all. It only makes sense if each buckyball is somehow behaving like a wave and going through both slits at once, then interfering with itself.
So that's the wave-particle duality thing, matter acting like both a particle and a wave. And this ties into Heisenberg's uncertainty principle from 1926, doesn't it?
Precisely. Heisenberg realized there's a fundamental limit. You can't know both a particle's exact position and its exact velocity at the same instant.
And it's not just that our tools are bad.
No, it's built into nature. The more precisely you measure one, the less precisely you inherently know the other. It's a fundamental fuzziness, completely unlike our classical world where we assume everything has a precise position and speed.
So if we can't know things precisely, does that mean nature isn't deterministic after all? Laplace's clockwork idea is out.
Well, yes and no. Quantum physics is deterministic in how the probabilities evolve, but it's fundamentally probabilistic about the outcomes of measurements. It's not like rolling dice where we just don't know all the forces. Nature itself doesn't seem to decide the exact outcome beforehand. It allows for multiple possibilities, each with a certain probability. When we measure, one of those possibilities becomes real, but we can't predict which one with certainty. It's inherent randomness.
Wow. Okay. This leads to Richard Feynman's idea, which sounds completely bonkers. This sum over histories.
It does sound bonkers, but it works. Feynman realized that to get from point A to point B, a quantum particle doesn't just take one path. It simultaneously takes every single possible path it could conceivably take. All of them, at the same time.
Every path. Like looping around Jupiter on the way from my hand to the table.
Well, technically yes, though paths that are wildly different from the classical path tend to cancel each other out. But the calculation involves summing up the contributions of all possible histories or paths. And incredibly, this mathematical framework perfectly reproduces all the results of quantum mechanics. Reality at that level seems to be this sum of all possibilities.
Okay, my head hurts a little. So what does all this quantum weirdness, multiple paths, probability uncertainty tell us about the universe on the grandest scale?
Well, these quantum ideas, especially the sum over histories, are crucial for modern cosmology and theories like M-theory. M-theory isn't one single equation, but more like a network of connected theories, each describing reality under different conditions. And importantly, it strongly suggests that our universe isn't unique. It incorporates Feynman's idea. The universe itself doesn't have just one history, it has all possible histories. And our universe, the one we observe, is likely just one possible outcome among many that could arise naturally from the laws of physics, specifically from quantum fluctuations in the very early moments. No need for a designer to set things up just so.
So putting it all together, the grand design is basically saying the universe is governed by laws, but those laws are quantum laws, which means reality isn't fixed, history isn't singular, and maybe our universe is just one bubble in a much larger cosmic foam of possibilities. It shifts us away from thinking there's one objective reality out there to to seeing reality as something deeply tied to our observations and the models we use. Is that fair?
That's a very good summary. It's a profound shift. And it naturally leads you to wonder, what does this all mean for that ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything? It's certainly a more complex picture than just getting the number 42.
Definitely more complex. And look, if this discussion's got you thinking, remember to check out our YouTube channel, Mindful Moments. We have more AI-driven book analysis there, great for exploring these kinds of big ideas rationally. And do check out our other podcasts, too, where we explore lots of other fascinating books and concepts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, maybe share it with someone else who likes to ponder the big questions. And if you want the full story, you can grab a copy of The Grand Design by Hawking and Mlodinow using the link in the show notes. Highly recommended.
And maybe leave you with this final thought. If our brains really do construct reality using models, like the book suggests, how might understanding these scientific models, quantum mechanics, M-theory, model-dependent realism, actually change how you perceive your own everyday life, your own reality? What new questions does that open up for you? Something to chew on.